Welcome to HQ Live. I'm Vicki Hoth from Handi Quilter, and today I am actually in my home studio, or in my home, and we have got such an awesome plan here for you. We have about 36 educators, national educators around the country and in Canada, and they travel and they do events and they do shows and they work with customers like you on quilting. And so they get lots of questions like how to do tension and all sorts of different questions. So we've taken those questions and we've sent it out to our educators and said, hey, will you help our customers with this question? So now, just because I'm home doesn't mean I can't answer your questions if you have some. So if you've got any questions, go ahead, type them in there, and we as educators will answer those questions because these subjects bring up a lot more questions, and we'll see if we can help you today. We're going to get started right now, and we're going to introduce Ashley Malinowski, and her question is, what accessories do I purchase when I'm buying a Longarm?
Some accessories to purchase when you first buy your quilting system include a ruler base. This one specifically fits my HQ Forte. Make sure whatever ruler base that you are buying is for your specific machine. This one has some notches in it, so it sits down right around that quilting throat space, sits down and clicks right back in. It extends your quilting space so that you're able to use rulers. If you did not have this extension base on, your ruler would be flopping up and bouncing, and that defeats the reason that you've used a ruler in the first place on your quilting projects. Some specific Handi Quilter rulers, there is a lot of them. Some good ones to get started out with is the HQ Versatile. You've got that HQ Mini Scallop ruler. This one's got some scallops at the top, which is great for borders, or if you have a square to make kind of a picture frame around it. At the bottom there's those stops so that your foot can go right against it, and you've got some registration lines as well to line up with any ditch work that you have, or your seam, or any registration marks on your specific quilt. We've also got the HQ Ditch Ruler, which is another one, again, for either shallop curves or stitching in the ditch. You've got the HQ Multi-Clamshell, which is a really fun ruler. I do the clamshells on quilting projects, and you've got a lot of different varieties with that as far as sizes on that particular template. And the next one I use a ruler of the wave set from. This one I just happened to pick up wave D for. On the back of all these rulers there is some design ideas. And also Handi Quilter has filmed a lot of these rulers and made videos about how to use them, ruler safety, and some other tips to use along the way. Another thing that goes hand in hand with your rulers is the Surefoot. It is a higher profile foot than your machine came with. There is also little notches there so that you can easily thread your needle, which is very important. And the ruler just goes right against that foot, and because it is a 1/4 inch thick, it doesn't have that opportunity to slip under your foot, which is really great because you don't want to damage your ruler or your needle, or in hindsight your machine. Another foot is the glide foot. I love the glide foot for working on customer quilts or when you're first getting started charity quilts. You never know how that piecing is. Sometimes you can be at the iron, and by the time you get to the machine, something could have happened. Maybe that seam wasn't completely sewn, or you're working on t-shirt quilts. I love that to go over. I'm not getting hung up on any graphics or embroideries that are on the t-shirt quilts. If you have any quilts with embroidery or appliques, again, this glides right over it, and you don't have that chance that that foot is going underneath your quilt top. Another accessory for your quilting machine is a super leader. It is the leader that attaches to that take-up pole, which is that back pole that you attach your backing to. The super leader is 27 inches long, and it allows you to not be reaching over so much when you're pinning your backing on. Another thing that I love for it is if I'm working on a smaller project, I can leave that quilt closer to me, and so I can be able to see what I'm working on, especially if you're also doing a border on a bigger quilt and you need to do some micro work on it, or you just need some good accuracy to actually be able to see what you're doing, not quilting it so far away from your eyes. The last thing that's a great accessory if you do not have it with your machine is a quilt from the back kit. They're handlebars that attach to the back of the machine and allow you to use pantographs, which are the paper that you have on the back of your machine that you follow with a laser light, and also the stylus and the groovy board accessories. That would be something you can use the quilt from the back kit from.
Our next one is Gail Berry Graham, and she is going to talk to us about tension.
Hi Vicki, thanks for the great introduction, and thanks so much for the invitation to come today and speak about tension. It really is one of my favorite subjects, and I think it's a subject that a lot of us just want to really gloss over because we're afraid of it. But we're going to take all the mystery out of that today. But before we move ahead with the tension, you need to know we're going to move ahead based on a few assumptions. Number one assumption, that you have a clean machine. Not just the bobbin area, but the machine wheels, the carriage wheels, and the track have all been dusted off. Second assumption is about thread, that you're using a quality thread, not something from the Dollar Palooza store or Grandma's Wooden Cones or serger thread. You're going to use a quality thread. I don't care if that thread is a cotton or a polyester. I don't care if it has a sheen to it or is flat. I don't care if it's 100 weight or a 30 weight. It's just going to be a quality thread. Then I'm going to assume that you have the correct size needle for that project. And not just the correct size, that you're starting with a new needle for this project. So a new needle that matches the size of the thread. Our next assumption, that you have done a bobbin drop test. You've wound your bobbin correctly, you've done that bobbin drop test, and it's ready to go. And then the last and final assumption that I'm going to make is that you have threaded your machine correctly. That you have put your thread on this back post here. You've taken your thread up through this thread guide, all the way through here, through all 3 holes for most of your threads. Some of you only like to use 2 holes when you get to some of your specialty threads. Go ahead and do that. And you have followed the rest of the quilting path, or the threading path, the thread path in the correct way according to your manual, according to your on-screen instructions, and you are threaded and ready to go. Now, and only now, are we ready to talk about the tension. One of the things I've done for myself to make working on my tension a lot easier, I bought myself a pair of these easy grasp quilt clamps, so that now I can just cut some extra fabric, sandwich it together, and I just clamp it to the back and front bars so that I can have a test piece put on here. And here's what I'm going to do to test. I am just going to pull my thread up, and I'm just going to take a few stitches with the settings I currently have, and then just flip over this side. And if I'm not happy with it, I'm going to adjust the tension by turning my tension knob right here. I'm not going to be afraid to touch this knob, and I'm going to turn it. When I want to tighten my tension, I'm going to give it a good at least quarter or half turn to the right or away from me. When I want to loosen my tension, I'm going to give it a good turn towards me. Always at least a quarter turn. I know when we do our bobbin case, we turn that little screw up just a little bit at a time, but don't be afraid of this tension dial. You can really turn it. So then it's just a matter of doing all those tests to find out what tension settings you need for this particular thread. So I know a lot of you have questions, so let's get right to some of those questions. So the first question, why do you even have to do this? How do you know it's right? And why do you have to change it for every quilt? Well, you have to change your tension for every quilt for lots of reasons. One, you may have a different thread. You've got different fabric. You've pieced it differently. All kinds of reasons for changing it. But not only are you going to change it for every quilt, you need to change it, check it for every bobbin. So if you just check it, but if you use the same thread and the same bobbin weight thread all the time, it's going to be a really easy thing for you to do. But you don't have to. You can change up that top and bottom thread anytime you want. Now you have a question, the next question. Right. So it looks good on the bottom, but not on the top. So if I can get my camera guy to focus in here, I'm just going to move this a little bit to give you better lighting. So on the bottom or the back of this sample, these are nice stitches. They look nice. You like it on the bottom. But then when you look at the top, you just don't like it. It's laying too flat. It's pulling up a little bit of the bobbin thread. That's an indication that your top thread is too tight. I'm down a little bit for this next question because the next question is the exact opposite. So it looks good on the top. We like how the top stitching has turned out. But we don't necessarily like how it looks on the back. We're getting some eyelashing on the back or big loops here on the back. If you can see this, we don't like that. That's an indication that our tension is too loose. Now, if we have big loops on the back or lots of thread buildup, this is what happens when you have not flossed it properly. So by flossing it, it means you have not gone in these tension discs properly. So you have big loops on the back. And the last question that we've got coming up. Okay, so somebody's asked, we have red thread coming to the top. So you've got red thread in your bobbin, you've got white thread on top, and you can see that red thread on the top of your quilt. How do we avoid that? Don't use such diametrically opposing colors. If you don't want to use the exact same color, use one that's going to blend in, and it's going to ease a lot of sins. How do we know our tension is just right? We like the stitching on the top as well as the stitching on the bottom. If you can turn your quilt over and you're just as happy with how the back looks, you've got good stitching back here. So I really want to thank everybody again. It's been great being here. I hope we've answered those tension questions real quick for you. Thanks. Bye now.
Thanks, Gail. That was great about tension. The next one we have is Debbie Brown, and she's going to talk to us about bobbins and winding bobbins.
Thanks, Vicki. When winding bobbins before quilting, there's no magic formula. I usually use an 80 weight bobbin thread, and when I quilt a throw size quilt, it takes less than 2 bobbins to finish the quilt. If I'm going to be quilting a twin size quilt with a single edge to edge pattern, that might take 3 bobbins. If you use a thicker thread, a 50 weight, a 40 weight, you're going to need many more bobbins. So it's kind of a trial and error, no easy answer. When loading the bobbin in the bobbin case, I make sure the bobbin is winding clockwise. I put the bobbin in, I bring it through the slit and under the spring. To clean my forte, I need to use canned air instead of a brush because there's a light in the bobbin area, and there's a little wire that is supplying power to the light. If I put a brush in there to clean the lint out, it can damage the wire. So I need to use canned air, just a couple. And if I see any of this extra hanging in there, I can pull it out. If you have a machine other than an Amara, Forte, or an Infinity, you should not use canned air in the bobbin area. You should clean it out with a brush. To oil my bobbin hook, I am going to place oil in this ridge right here. It will end up at 6 o'clock, whether I put the oil at 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock on the clock. So I'm going to put 1 drop of oil here. And then I am going to make my needle move up and down without any thread in it. To place the bobbin case into the machine, I'm going to hold the bobbin so that the thread is showing out the top, and I am leaving the latch closed. I'm not holding it open. I am going to position it in and turn it until it's seated. And then I'm going to push it in to hear the click. If it doesn't click, it's not in. Thanks for visiting my sewing room.
Now we're going to listen to Dee Mayer, and she's going to talk to us about if we have issues on our machine, who do we contact? Where do we find help? So go ahead, Dee.
Hi, I'm Dee Mayer, and I'm a national educator with Handi Quilter. I've been using and loving Handi Quilter products for about 15 years. I'm here today to talk to you about the question, what do I do if I have an issue while I'm quilting? I'm happy to tell you that there are numerous resources available to you. If it's a mechanical issue with your machine or your Pro Stitcher, of course the first place that you're going to want to turn is to your retailer. They can walk you through questions that will help identify the problem and find a solution for it. They can also help you with those questions when your memory just needs jogging. What does this function do? Or how do I make this happen? If it's a more complicated question, you always have access to Handi Quilter in Salt Lake City by phone during business hours. The technical solutions people are amazing at talking you through a problem and getting you up and running again. Believe me, I know from personal experience. The customer support and those talented quilters in the education department can also answer many of your questions. If you're having trouble, you don't know how to load the quilt, you don't know how to adjust the tension, maybe you've gotten to the end and you don't have enough batting and are not sure how to fix that problem, or maybe your borders are wavy and you just aren't sure how you're going to get them to lay down enough to quilt. There's an extensive library of videos on the Handi Quilter website. Go to handiquilter.com, click on Education, and you'll get a drop-down menu. And the first line will say Video Library. There you'll find many videos on problem solving, but you'll also find videos on quilting techniques that will encourage you to grow in your skills. Pro Stitcher and Pro Stitcher Designer also have websites, and they have a lot of wonderful, simple, easy to understand videos on how to use those products. You won't believe all the amazing things that you can do with the tools in those two programs. You're going to have many a wow, look what I just did moment. Another resource is Facebook. There are sites, there are groups for Handi Quilter, Pro Stitcher, and Pro Stitcher Designer. If you go to your home page and search for them, you can then request to join and get in on all the fun. There are many members who are Handi Quilter owners who are more than willing to offer advice. On the Handi Quilter webpage, there's also a button that says Support. If you click that, you'll go to the HQ Cares page, and there you'll find a section on troubleshooting tips, general information, even on questions about how to use the web page. A lot of our educational videos are also available on YouTube. And on any of these platforms, you can request to be notified when new videos come out. So please join and get those notifications. Handi Quilter and our retailers stand behind our products 100%, so you never need to feel you have nowhere to turn. So go on creating quilts, these wonderful cloth expressions of our love and care, and know that if you need support, it will always be there for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Man, there's so many resources for us when we have issues or when we need help. So thanks a lot, Dee. Our next one is Patty Kern, and she's going to talk to us about, can I quilt from the right to the left, or should I quilt from the left to the right?
Hello, I'm coming to you today from my home studio in Haymarket, Virginia, and I'm going to talk to you about the whether or not you should be quilting from left to right or right to left, or if you can do either, and why you might be getting and how to solve any thread breaking issues you might be experiencing when you try to quilt from right to left in a straight line. So first of all, we normally quilt in most designs for edge to edge or whatever. You start on the left and work your way over to the right. You would tie off your thread, bring your machine back, and start over again. There are occasions where, in different designs, for instance straight line quilting, that you would want to be able to not only go from the left to the right, but also come back right to left before you have to tie off and break and start over again. So for instance, in modern quilting, here's an example of that where I've done straight line quilting from one side to the other, and I've done it in both directions. Coming from the right to the left, you may experience some challenges where you have your threads breaking. And if that is happening to you, I have some tips and suggestions that I think you will find helpful in overcoming that challenge. So first of all, with every quilt that I put on my machine, I start with a new needle. Even though I may not have used the needle very much and I don't see that there's any changes to the tip, it looks all great, there could be some microscopic changes to that tip of the needle, and those even microscopic changes can be affecting your thread and causing it to shred and break. So start with a fresh needle. Also, you want to make sure you're using the correct needle size, the size that is appropriate for the type of thread or size thread that you are using or that you chose to use. So check your a quick guide that I have found very useful on the Superior Threads website is the Longarm quilting guide, and it's a free download, superiorthreads.com, and I've actually laminated a copy of it and keep it next to my machine so I can refer to that and make sure I'm always using the appropriate size needle. You still could experience with the recommended needle size, if you're still experiencing some thread breaks, you might move it up one needle size and give yourself a little bit bigger hole so that there's not so much tension on that thread as it's going in and out of your quilt. You also want to make sure that you are using high quality quilt thread. So threads that are made specifically for quilting on Longarm machines. So make sure you're using a very high quality thread to begin with. Also, you always want to make sure you're using or checking your tension. Tension is something that we need to address and check always, and with every bobbin change, with every whenever you change threads. So keep a check on your tension. The way I like to do that is I'll make a little sandwich beside the quilt I'm working on, and I use these nice little clamps that I got from Handi Quilter, and I can test out my tension, and so I don't need to crawl underneath of my frame and look at the bottom with a flashlight. I can just pick this up and take a look at the back very easily and quickly and keep a check on my tension. So always check your tension. You might just need to slow it down a little bit. So if you're using hand guided or slow your speed down. If you're using robotics, the Pro Stitcher has a great Opti Stitch feature that you can go in and program and slow your speed down. So check your speed. You might not just need to slow down a little bit. And finally, your sandwich on your frame, it could be a little bit too tight. You don't want it to look like a trampoline. When it's if it's too tight, you're going to see a lot of vibration of the quilt in the machine, and that causes a lot of stress and tension on your thread, which can lead to your thread breaks. So loosen it up. I like to say you don't want it to be a trampoline, you want it to look more like a hammock, a very gentle curve to it and looseness to your sandwich. I hope you have found these tips helpful and you use them in your quilting, and I hope very soon we'll be able to get back out there and see you at an event near you. Happy quilting!
Our next one is Vicki Kirkfleet, and she's going to talk to us about rulers and that ruler base and how important that is.
Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be able to share some information about how to use rulers safely on your long arm. One of the very first things that you will need to consider for your long arm is a ruler base. If you take a look right here on your machine by your needle plate, you will notice that that surface area is not a very steady area for you to be able to balance a ruler safely and to use your ruler on this. So instead, you do want to make sure that you have a ruler base for your machine. Now this is a steady fit ruler base that goes with the Amara and the Forte. Our ruler bases are machine specific, so you will want to make sure that you get the right ruler base for your machine. It is very easy to install. We merely slide it on and lock it in place. Now, I have created the perfect surface area in order to use on my long arm and safely use rulers. Another safety feature you might want to consider when working with rulers is to use the Surefoot. Your machine came with the ruler foot, and you can add the purchase of a Surefoot to it, which really helps to add a little bit more confidence when you are traveling around the edge of that ruler and you're stitching. One of the things that you'll need to remember as you are using a ruler base is if you are going to be putting any designs over onto the edge or the border of your quilt, you might find that your ruler base will bump against your bungees. You can solve this problem by adding either twill tape to your sandwich over on the side. I often used at the very beginning some old sew-offs that I cut into strips, and I would pin it to the edge of my backing and then attach my bungees to it. Or another method that I most frequently use is taking a piece of fabric and inserting a paint stick inside of it and pinning it to the edge and attaching my bungees to the paint stick. Let's get our machine settings for ruler work. Let's make sure that we have our machine regulated and in precision. I like to stitch with 12 stitches per inch. Sometimes I will increase it to 15 to 16 when I'm stitching in the ditch to really hide those stitches. And I also like to make sure that my needle stop is in the down position. So as I stop and I have to adjust my hands or my rulers, it's holding my place and it's not slipping. So let's talk rulers. This is the Versatool. It is a tool I like to use when I'm working with beginners with rulers. It is 1/4 inch thick. All rulers that you use with your long arm should be 1/4 inch thick, nothing less. And on the back, I have attached a little bit of ruler grip. It is sold in a package by Handi Quilter. It comes in strips. You may cut the strip to any size that you would like to have it. As you can see here, they aren't very large, and it adheres to the back of your ruler. The reason why this is so great is because of the fact that it helps to really grip onto the fabric and hold the position of the ruler correctly. This is the way I like to store my rulers because I'm always doing something with rulers. I have these little rolling carts, and I had my husband cut a piece of wood and put it inside of there and then groove out some areas so that way my rulers stand upright and always at an easy to reach place for me. Sometimes I have to travel with my rulers. So with the ruler grip on the back, it could, if they are laying on top of each other, scratch markings on another ruler. So I often use painter's tape on the back in order to cover up my ruler grip. This also works great though, to use the painter's tape on the back of your ruler, so that way if you are doing a project where you want your ruler to slide easily by having the grip covered up with painter's tape, it allows you to slide your ruler along very easily. These are a couple of designs that I have stitched out for you using the Versatool. The number one thing is the clamshell. So right here, you will notice that I do have some clamshells that I have stitched out. I slide my ruler up to my hopping foot, put gentle pressure right up close to the edge, and I am able to stitch around. When I come over here, I stop and I slide my ruler up to the area that I want to stitch, and I can stitch again. One thing you want to remember is as the machine moves, so does your ruler base move. So it's very important that you always keep your pressure points up close to where your needle is sewing. So here's some clamshells. Here's some offsetting clamshells that I've. You can also create circles using your Versatool. This is a little orange peel design. Using the straight edge, you can do lines, stitching in the ditch. Using the right angle, I can create little arrows in a border or a sashing, or again, some lines. Using the swag, I can create the general swag design, or I could do a swag and piano keys. And a lot of times people forget that you can also create a serpentine design where you come up and you merely switch the ruler around, and then you have created the perfect spine for feathers. The Surefoot is not the only foot that you can use with rulers when you're doing ruler work. You can also use the Echo Feet. I echoed around circular designs using the 1/4" Echo Foot. I had my original stitch design here. I changed it out, used the Echo Foot, and stitched around the exact same ruler to create an echo line all around on every one of these circles. And so the Echo Feet do come in 3 sizes, and so you can choose to use which size you want to use with your ruler. And it works just like your regular hopping foot. It will glide right along that ruler, so you don't always have to find the position lines when it comes for echoing. You can merely place the ruler on the previously stitched line and then echo around it. Another set of feet that you can also use with rulers would be your square feet. Your square feet come in 2 sizes, 1/4", 1/2". And again, you can create piano keys using the 1/2" one. Here's my previously stitched line. I can go in and I can stitch right along that edge of that ruler and then slide it up and come back and stitch right along that edge of that ruler. So the square feet work wonderful with ruler work because they do have this nice flat area. But don't think that just because they have this nice straight edge that you cannot use it on another design, because you can use it. It just glides right across that top. The new frames that come with the Amara, the Forte, and the Infinity are called the Studio 2 frame or the Gallery 2 frame. These frames allow you to load your fabrics in 2 different methods. We call that the dual load method. For today, I loaded my fabric in what is called the standard view method. But you can actually adjust your frame to what we call the clear view method, which actually does drop the poles down, and it allows you to set your rulers a little bit more comfortably on the frame and you don't lose a lot of space. I hope that you are able to come to an event in person in the next coming months when we are no longer self-isolating. I so look forward to seeing you, meeting you, and getting to know you. Or if I'm not in your area, please contact your local retailer and take a class from any of our other educators.
Wow, I love using rulers, and thank you, Vicki, for helping us understand the importance of the ruler base and how to use rulers. Now we're moving on to Jane Hoprich, and Jane is going to talk to us about the sit-down or suite or Capri machine, and do I need an overlay, and what is an overlay for?
Hi, I'm Jane Hoprich, Handi Quilter National Educator from Maryland. So as far as an overlay for your table, on the Handi Quilter Capri, you do not need an overlay for the table. If you have a Sweet 16 and you have the True Stitch, then the True Stitch comes with an overlay. And that's what the overlay was originally designed for, was to allow the controller of the True Stitch to be able to go across the entire table. With the Capri, the stitch regulation is built right into the table, so there's no need to have an overlay. You're going to adjust your machine so that it sits level with your table. And if yours doesn't, there are some little feet that come with the machine that you can change out the feet that are on the machine underneath, and you can add those different heights on there to make it level with the table, so that ruler work and will just slide very easily across it. I would not recommend waxing the table. Just remember to keep your table nice and clean. On the Capri, the table is this very slick surface, so the fabric just glides across it very easily. If you have a Sweet 16 and you have the overlay, there's no need to wax that too. But I will make a recommendation for you. If you're using rulers and you have handy grip on the rulers, so that you can grip the fabric, make sure not to place the grip tape down onto the table when you're not using them, because they can scratch the table surface, and you don't want to make any scratches in this if possible. The reason for the overlay on the Sweet 16 was to make the True Stitch, which is the stitch regulation, the external stitch regulation, rides smoothly across the entire surface of the machine. You have that controller that rides on top and reads how fast the fabric is moving, and it needed that smooth surface to go across the entire top of the table. With the Capri, you don't need that because the stitch regulation is built right into the table. So as long as you level everything out, you can do ruler work, your fabric, and everything should slide just nice and smooth over the entire surface. Stay safe and happy quilting.
Thanks, Jane. That was great information about the overlay. Now we're going to move on to Gina Simbita, and she is going to talk to us about using monofilament thread. I love using it, but it can be a rascal.
Hi there. Hi there. I'm so happy to see you. It's Gina Simbita from California, and I am here to talk about the monofilament thread. I absolutely love to use it. I don't know about you. It is a single strand, and it is normally made with either polyester or nylon, and I like the polyester made by Superior Threads called Monopoly. It comes in really big, last you forever spools. This actually has 10,000 yards, or they do have smaller spools that still will last you a long time, 2,200 yards. And it's available in clear or smoke. So depending on what kind of fabric you're going over, you might want clear or smoke, and we'll talk about that more later. It is very fine. Those of you who have quilted previously, years ago, it maybe was more like fishing line. Now it feels like it's about 100 weight. So it is nice and thin, great to quilt with. Okay, so tips on how to manage it, how to control it. The first thing that is really important is that you reduce that top tension of your machine. Those who have struggled with it many times is they haven't adjusted their tension. So you need to reduce that top tension way down. You can even, there are, on the Handi Quilter machines, there are 3 holes to put the thread through before you hit the tension discs. And you could just feed it through just one or 2 of the 3 to reduce the tension there as well. And then also I go to a smaller needle, size 14. Most people, you have a 16. If you don't have a 14 on hand for your long arm, you can try it with a 16 and you should be okay. But I usually do change to the 14 in order to get started because that's what the manufacturer recommends. And then also, there is, if the thread is kind of like spooling, cascading down and starts to kind of get caught, that's what these thread nets are for. So you can have that thread net on there and have the thread come out through there, and that will keep the thread on the spool till you need it. You don't absolutely have to do that, but if you find that that's a problem, go ahead and put that thread net on. And then the other thing is, I don't really put it in the bobbin because especially on the long arms, we're doing high speed. So I will put a neutral. I love the pre-wound Super Bobs by Superior also. But something neutral, so like with the clear, I'll use a light gray, and with the darker smoke, I will use a darker gray thread. It just kind of blends into the back and works really well for me. So I'm hoping that will be helpful to you. So what are the uses that I have found for the monopoly? One is stitch in the ditch. That stitching that you're going to be doing in the ditch to just kind of stabilize your whole quilt. This way, if you don't happen to be in that low side of the ditch and you get on the high where it tends to look more like top stitching rather than in the ditch, the clear is the monofilament is not going to show as much. It's going to hide a lot better. So I love it for that. I also love it on contrasting fabrics. And if I just want a texture and I just want the quilting kind of just to add that texture but not see that thread. This is a project that I did, and I don't know if you can see, but I did background micro quilting with my monofilament, and so I wasn't seeing the thread. I was just being able to quilt that down so that the other parts could really pop. So those are some of the uses that I have for the monofilament. Okay, how do we see it? It's so thin, and how do we get it threaded in our machine? Well, first off, there was one little trick I want to tell you about. I use a little piece of folded batting, and on our thread mask there is a little thing, and so that's how you get the thread through. But sometimes that thread wants to kind of pop back out. So I just slide this in between so that it will keep that thread from coming out. Now, if I want to see my thread and you have trouble with that, one little trick you can do is you can take a Sharpie, I'll put it against a piece of paper, and then draw on that tip of the thread so that now it's not clear anymore. It has a black tinge to it, and it works. It really is very helpful to help you see it. The other thing is put a little piece of paper right by where the needle is so that it will help you see that hole. Those are two little tricks that will really help you to get that threaded. I really hope that you are willing to try this. If you haven't already tried monofilament, give it a try. It's great. I love especially when I'm going to go over lots of different colors of fabric, and one thread really wouldn't be good for both. The monofilament is. I hope you'll give it a try. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. This has been so much fun seeing our educators, and for you to meet some of our educators that you've never met before, and for their wealth of knowledge that they can help you and all of us in the quilting world. So join us every month for HQ Live, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Handi Quilter YouTube channel, so that you can get all of that information, videos. We're constantly doing videos for you, for your help as you're quilting in your home. So join us next month, and we'll see you later.